So as a continuation of last week, we're going to be going over the rest of the essentials when building a computer. What's up everyone, Dimitri of Caddac Gaming here, and today we're going to be continuing the essentials of a computer. Last week we went over some of the core components like a CPU, the GPU, and your RAM. This week we're going to be going over the rest of the components like your power supply, your storage, your case, and your peripherals. So first up is storage, and there are two main types, hard drives and solid state drives. So hard drives, or HDDs, look like this. And they're usually quite large, 3.5 inch drives. They can get quite thick depending on the capacity, but these use physical moving platters to store data, and it has a little reader that goes across them, which is why they can get quite loud depending on the speed that they're running at and their age and their technology. Now, SSDs come in two main form factors. There's the 2.5 inch SSD, quite small, very thin. You can put these anywhere in your case. There are mounting places, but because these don't have any moving parts in them, you could really mount it to anything in your case with some double-sided tape. And in recent years, a very popular type of SSD is the M.2 SSD. Now, M.2 SSDs come in multiple types, but the main one is NVMe. There are also SATA M.2s, but generally you'd want to be going for an NVMe if you're going for this form factor. If you're going to go for SATA, you may as well just get a standard 2.5 inch drive. Now, what I mean between SATA and NVMe, SATA is the standard data connection port on both the 2.5 inch SSDs and the hard drives, the 3.5 inch drives. Now, SATA is a relatively old standard, and it has a standard maximum bandwidth. NVMe SSDs, however, have a much higher bandwidth as they go directly through the PCI lanes on your motherboard to your CPU. So if you remember that from last week, the PCI lanes have direct access to the CPU. That then allows them to go much quicker. And even if they are going through the chipset, it is still a more direct line and not going through any kind of complicated controller. And so they usually have a much higher throughput. Now, because they go through PCIe, there are Gen 3 SSDs and there are Gen 4 NVMe SSDs. Gen 4 NVMe SSDs are much quicker than Generation 3, but unless you're doing highly productive loads with your SSD, you're not really going to notice too much of a difference yet. There are technologies coming out that are supposed to utilize the Generation 4 standard a lot more, like direct access storage that the GPUs will be using to directly grab game assets from your SSD to help your games load significantly faster, which is what the Xbox Series X and Series S and the PS5 are currently using their own versions of this technology. Now, within SSDs, there are different types of NAND. So, as I mentioned, on a hard drive, it is a platter that spins around inside, and there's a little reader that goes ahead and reads data off that platter. On an SSD, however, it is using flash memory, just like a USB stick or your little SD cards that go into your phone or your tablet. Now, all flash memory is not created equal, and there are 4 main cell types for making NAND flash, but you really only have to focus on 2 as a consumer, a general consumer of flash. The 2 are called TLC, or triple level cell, or QLC, which is quad level cell. These 2 cell types become very important when looking at NVMe drives, especially because NVMe drives are usually priced in 2 different categories. A lot of the budget ones are a QLC flash, so the performance is usually hindered a little bit. And then there's also the topic of DRAM-less. So SSDs will either have a DRAM module or not. And as we mentioned last week, DRAM is a type of memory, and it is extremely quick. So DRAM is much quicker than NAND memory. So if you have a drive that has a DRAM memory module on it, It'll help speed up the drive and keep it quicker, and that's usually where the cache will be stored, which is kind of like the index for the drive. So it'll tell the computer where everything is, so it's a lot quicker to get to that information. If your SSD is DRAM-less, it uses a portion of the NAND memory as that cache, and as your drive gets more full, that cache becomes smaller, and then the index becomes smaller, so the drive will usually get a little bit slower. And it's already inherently slower because that index or that cache is on NAND flash instead of the much faster DRAM. Now, the end of this is just the more expensive SSDs will typically be a TLC and have a DRAM cache. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at SSDs. If you find one that is significantly cheaper than another and it's not on sale, it's likely because it either has no DRAM or it's a QLC drive. Typically the DRAM is going to be the biggest cost factor though. So now, what would make you choose a hard drive or a solid state drive over the other? With hard drives, the main caveat is the price. So hard drives will typically cost about 4 cents per gigabyte, whereas an SSD can cost about 10 cents per gigabyte. So when looking at that, that's more than double. And because of that, it's a lot cheaper to get large capacity hard drives and then use a solid state drive for things that you need that extra speed for. And because of that, hard drives are typically a much higher capacity, especially at the consumer pricing level. You can pick up a 4 terabyte hard drive for about $120, but for $120 you can get a 1 terabyte NVMe drive. You can tell the difference there in cost and capacities, and I do think that most of the consumer NVMe drives are still maxing out at 2 terabytes. There are some 4 terabyte ones out there, but they are extremely expensive and not really within the regular person's reach. Meanwhile, I pick up 4 terabyte hard drives all the time. I also have a couple of 12 terabyte hard drives in my server right now, so you won't be seeing any 12 terabyte SSDs at the consumer level for a long while. So if hard drives are so much cheaper, then why would you want to get an SSD? And there are multiple reasons, the main one being how much quicker they are. When somebody asks me the cheapest way to upgrade an old computer, I tell them throw an SSD in there and move your Windows install over to the SSD, and it will make a world of a difference. And it's true. SSDs are super quick, especially when compared to a hard drive. And when you move over tasks that are constantly being used, like your OS, your boot times are significantly faster. Opening folders is faster. Transferring between folders on the SSD is faster. And if you're transferring from an SSD to an SSD, it's also faster. And as I mentioned before, hard drives have moving parts in them, whereas solid state drives do not. So they are absolutely silent. So if you're building a computer for use in a music studio, for example, you're better off putting everything onto SSDs. And then if you need the extra storage after session, you go ahead and you plug, a hard drive in there, or you have some kind of network attached storage in another room, and then you transfer all of that data from said session over to that so that you're not getting any extra noise in your recording space. And another benefit of them having no physically moving parts is that they become a lot more reliable and less likely to fail. So a lot of hard drives, as they age, they will get very noisy, and if you notice your hard drive making a lot of erratic noise, that means it's likely about to fail, and you should transfer as much of the stuff off of it as possible before it does. With an SSD, however, you won't really notice that it's failing or that it has failed until you do run into an error. So sometimes your OS will pop up an error, or you'll go into a certain area of the drive and it's corrupted. So that is, maybe a little bit of a downside with the SSD, but generally having SSDs is a much better performance benefit over a hard drive, but having a hard drive is a much better cost benefit over SSDs. Well, that's enough storage talk. Now let's go on to power supplies. So the power supply is the powerhouse of your entire computer. And it's one thing that you really do not want to cheap out on, because every other component of your computer is powered by this power supply. So if you're going to build a computer, you put a nice 3080 in there, you get a 5900X or a 10900K, you get a really expensive motherboard, $200 to $300, and then you cheap out on your power supply. If that power supply dies, everything connected to it is likely going to die as well. So on top of looking at a reliable power supply, you're going to look at two main specs: the capacity and the efficiency rating. So the capacity is usually the main focus, and depending on your build and what you have planned for the future, your capacity is going to range quite a bit. So for the average consumer PC that's using a middle ground GPU and a middle of the road CPU and not too many hard drives, a 550 to 600 watt power supply, way more than enough. 450 I would say is a little bit low, because then you really don't have any kind of upgrade room. So I would normally say about 500 to 600, but you can go all the way up to 1600 watt power supplies, which are massive and way bigger than most people need to. We'll go over the capacities a little bit more in the build recommendations video, but just know that capacity is something that you really do have to look at, and you can use websites like PC Part Picker to look at the average wattage of your components and determine what kind of power supply you want from there. So the efficiency ratings kind of tell you how efficient a power supply is at a certain usage. Now, the 80 plus certificate is called that because of the 80% minimum efficiency needed for a power supply to get the certification. And now there are levels within that. Most commonly, you're going to see bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. Now, what the bronze to platinum levels do is that efficiency is higher at every level, so 20, 50, and 100%. So a bronze at 50% is 85% efficient. A silver at 50% is 88%. A gold at 50% is 90% efficient. And then a platinum at 50% is 92% efficient. So these efficiency ratings won't really affect most people. I normally recommend, if you can get a gold, go ahead and get a gold. But a bronze isn't going to be bad for your computer, and you should definitely refer to the tier list that people on the Linus Tech Tips community have made, where they kind of grade a whole bunch of power supplies based on the components that are within them and their general reliability. And now everything gets put within a case. So cases are probably the component that has the most preference and personal design choice when building your computer. The case is the most visible component of your computer, and it allows you to express your own, visual preferences when building. There are a few things that you should look at when buying a computer case. One is, does it fit your motherboard? So motherboards come in different sizes, from ATX to micro ATX to ITX. So make sure when you're buying all your components that you make sure that your motherboard is supported within your computer case. Another thing to take a look at is the features. So do you want your case to have a tempered glass panel? Do you want your case to have good airflow? Do you want your case to have built-in RGB? Do you want your case to have a lot of hard drive bays because you plan on throwing a lot of storage in there? All of these things are important to look at when building your computer, and personally, I refer more to the performance and have the looks a little bit on the secondary side. I would never choose a really good looking case if it has really bad airflow, but there are some really good looking cases that have great airflow, so I don't really miss out on much. But in the end, it is personal preference, and if you choose the looks over the performance, that's just something you're going to have to compensate for or deal with in the longer run. Now, we are going to quickly go over the OS, but chances are, if you're watching these videos, you're going to be installing Windows. There are different versions of Windows, but the average person would just need Windows Home. There are lots of places to buy it at. You can buy it officially from Windows, from the Microsoft Store. You can buy it unofficially from places like CD Keys or eBay. But make sure you do get a code before you build your computer, because you don't want to finish your computer, sit down, turn it on, and then realize I don't have Windows. And last but not least, your peripheral. And peripherals would include anything from your monitor, your keyboard, your mouse, your microphone, your headset, your headphones, depending on which route you want to go. And all of these are really important things to consider when building your computer. A lot of people do forget to factor in the cost of a monitor, especially when building their first computer. And unless you have one laying around, it's not going to be the cheapest component, but it's also not going to break the bank if you don't want it to. Now, I do have some videos planned for these peripherals to be done on their own. I do plan on doing a monitor video. I do plan on doing a mouse and keyboard video, and then I do plan on doing a headphone video. But if there's anything in particular that you'd like me to focus on, please feel free to leave a comment in the section below, and I'd gladly cover it if that's what you guys would like. And that about wraps it up. If you guys do have any questions, comments, or feedback, please feel free to leave it in the comment section below. If you'd like to have more of a discussion, feel free to go ahead and join my Discord. Love to have you there, and we can have a little bit more of a back and forth. If you've made it this far, thank you very much. I appreciate it. If you appreciated the video, please consider giving me a thumbs up and liking the video. Maybe hit that subscribe button, hitting the bell icon so you can be notified of the future videos in this series that will be coming out. As always, I stream on Twitch from Friday until Tuesday. Come check me out, come say hello. If you have any questions, you can ask me them there, and I'll try my best to answer them as quickly as I can. And again, thank you for making it to the end of this video. I appreciate you very much. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you next Friday.